Is the Bible actually a spell book in disguise? If that's true, then you weren't meant to just read the Bible, you were meant to use it. Imagine Jesus not as a savior figure, but as a master magician. And the Psalms, not just hymns, but powerful spells to summon angels and demons. And imagine the 12 disciples as 12 signs of the zodiac in disguise. And imagine a divine word that's so powerful that mystics believed it held the blueprint of the entire universe. What if the Bible is a manual for activating power? Real power, the kind that could rewrite your identity, awaken your consciousness, maybe even bend reality itself. Now, before you grab your torch and pitchfork, I want you to think about this. All of this was hidden on purpose. The Bible itself admits it multiple times. Jesus even said he only revealed the real mysteries to his inner circle. He said, "It has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given." The Bible flat out says it's hiding something. Proverbs even says, "It is the glory of God to conceal a matter, but the glory of kings to search out a matter." Essentially, the divine hid truth, and it's up to seekers, you, me, kings, anyone hungry for wisdom, to dig them out. So if secret knowledge is biblically endorsed, what might those secrets actually be? Well, my name is Morg. I'm an ex-Christian revealing hidden knowledge to wake up the world, and by the end of this video, you won't see the Bible the same way ever again. Because the stories were never just stories, they were spells, and you're gonna discover exactly how to unlock its codes and awaken the power inside you. See, the Bible has been used to control you, but now you're gonna learn how to use it to break those chains and ignite the power inside you. Our first stop, the stars. Okay, have you ever noticed how the Bible is weirdly obsessed with the number 12? There's 12 tribes of Israel, 12 apostles, 12 gates of the heavenly city. Even Jesus's first words in the Bible, according to the Gospel of Luke, are at age 12. 12s are everywhere. Now, look closer at Christ's 12 disciples. Why 12? All right, sure, one answer is because there were 12 tribes of Israel, but some researchers say that this is not a coincidence. It's astrology in disguise. In fact, the infamous documentary Zeitgeist argued that the 12 disciples are simply the 12 constellations of the zodiac, which Jesus, being the sun, travels about with. This text, the Bible, has more to do with astrology than anything else. In other words, the gospel is a big celestial allegory. Jesus is the sun traveling through the year, and each disciple or star sign plays a role in the story. Brings a completely new meaning to the whole Son of God thing, doesn't it? So if Jesus is the sun and the disciples are the zodiac, what does that actually mean in astrology? Well, it's a map of your consciousness. The sun, according to astrology, isn't just a flaming gas ball. It's you. It represents your soul and your identity, your inner light. And the zodiac? Well, that's the 12-part cosmic wheel, and from our point of view on the earth, the sun appears to move through it over the course of a year. Well, each sign symbolizes a different phase of transformation, a distinct lesson or archetype in your personal evolution. It's not about worshiping the sun, it's about becoming it. But it gets deeper because the sun is also tied to death and resurrection, just like Jesus. Think about it. The sun rises in the east, climbs to its peak at noon, and then slowly descends into the west where it disappears into darkness. Gone. Dead. But come morning, like clockwork, it rises again. This is the original resurrection story, the oldest myth humanity ever told. In ancient Egypt, the sun was Ra, sailing across the sky by day and journeying through the underworld by night, dying and being reborn each dawn. And then there's Jesus. Jesus says, "I am the light of the world." And guess what? So is the literal freaking sun. Jesus' journey follows the sun path. He rises in glory, descends into death, and rises again. But in this interpretation, Christ's story is actually your story, because this is cosmic psychology. The death and rebirth of the sun mirrors our own inner transformation. We die to our old selves and we are born again in the light of our new selves. That's the resurrection, a symbol of your awakening. Still not convinced that astrology shows up in the Bible? Let's talk about the wise men. You know the story. Jesus is born and suddenly mysterious wise men show up out of nowhere. They're called magi, a word that literally refers to astrologer priests from the east. And how did they find him? They followed a star. The moment Jesus is born, the first people to recognize his divine nature are astrologers, and the Bible celebrates them. So if astrology was so evil, why were astrologers the first to show up to worship the Son of God? Which brings us to another number the Bible is completely obsessed with, the number 7, and it shows up constantly. 7 days of creation, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 angels. The entire book of Revelation is practically sponsored by the number 7. Even the first verse of the Bible might hold a secret about this 7. Genesis 1:1 says, "In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth." But in the original Hebrew, it's Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, which is exactly 7 words. And some Kabbalists interpret this as a reference to the 7 days of creation. So what's the deal with 7? Well, here's where it comes back to the stars. In the ancient world, Babylonian, Greek, Roman, there were 7 wandering stars visible to the naked eye. Today we call them the classical planets, which are the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. These weren't just lights in the sky. They were believed to be divine intelligences, forces, energies that shaped fate and personality, and they were sacred. 7 sacred lights moving through the 12 constellations of the zodiac. There is a plausible connection between the biblical use of 7 and the classical 7 planets, especially considering ancient Hebrew culture was influenced by Babylonian astronomy and cosmology. So when the Bible uses 7 over 600 times, it's not just for dramatic effect. Even the menorah, the 7-branched lamp in the temple, some believe it was a symbol of these 7 celestial lights. So now decode it with me. If 12 is the sacred structure, the wheel of time and archetypes, 7 is the energy flowing through it, the planetary forces guiding the soul, structure and motion, order and power. This isn't just about people and places. This is about you and your soul, your evolution. And once you start seeing that, you realize the Bible isn't just telling stories, it's casting spells. And if you think that's wild, just wait, because we're about to reveal a word so powerful, they said all reality is structured around it. So what happens when you speak it? Let's find out. If the Bible is a spell book, then the ultimate spell might just be the name of God. Those 4 mysterious letters, Yud, He, Vav, He. You might have heard it pronounced as Jehovah or Yahweh, but in Jewish tradition, the name is so sacred, it's never spoken aloud. Why? Because it's not just a name, it's a formula, a cosmic key, a vibration so powerful it was said to uphold the fabric of creation itself. And this is where the Kabbalists come in. So, who are they? The Kabbalists were Jewish mystics and basically spiritual hackers who believed that the Torah, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, was more than just a religious document. They saw it as a multidimensional code. Kabbalah literally derives from a Hebrew word meaning to receive, as in receiving hidden wisdom. The core mystical text of the Kabbalah is called the Zohar, and it's like the secret key for decoding the Torah. And the Zohar makes one thing crystal clear. Woe to the man who says that the Torah came to simply relate stories and mundane matters. If this were so, even today we could make a Torah from mundane tales and even better ones. But all the words of the Torah are sublime matters and supreme secrets. Now, hey, this is not my interpretation. This is the Zohar, the heart of Jewish mysticism, saying that if you read the Torah and only see history or moral lessons, you're missing the point entirely. The Zohar continues, the narratives of the Torah are only its outer garments. Woe to the one who regards this garment as the Torah itself. Such a person will have no share in the world to come. All right, let that sink in. The stories, the commandments, the miracles, they're just the clothing. The real meaning is hidden underneath the garment. Kabbalists and esotericists have long taught that the name of God, also called the Tetragrammaton, is a key to unlocking the structure of the cosmos. Those 4 letters are like a blueprint, and they correspond to all sorts of concepts around the number 4. 4 elements, 4 directions, 4 seasons, but most importantly in Kabbalah, it corresponds to the 4 worlds or levels of reality. Yud corresponds to Atzilut, the world of emanations. He to Bria, the creative world. Vav to Yetzirah, the world of formation. And He final to Asiyah, the world of action or the physical world. In other words, Yud He Vav He is seen as a process, the flow from pure spirit down to material existence. It's a formula for manifestation, but it gets even deeper. According to Kabbalists, the Yud is masculine, He feminine, Vav masculine, and He final feminine. So it's a kind of yin-yang symbol. In other words, the divine name is a formula for a process of creation that contains both masculine and feminine energies balanced and intertwined. It's not male or female in a modern gendered sense, but as a metaphor for poles of energy, like positive and negative charges. Basically, a symbolic structure of creation, polarity, and unity. All right, cool, but what about the New Testament and all the miracles that Jesus did, walking on water, water, multiplying loaves, raising the dead, and the classic crowd pleaser, turning water into wine. Well, on the surface, it's a divine party trick, but is there more to it? Hell yeah, there is. Some esoteric interpreters say that Jesus' miracles aren't just displays of divine power, but metaphors, alchemical acts, coded teachings meant to initiate transformation to those that can see the secrets hidden in the stories. Why do you think Jesus constantly says his message will be understood only to those with the eyes to see and the ears to hear? In fact, Jesus flat out says he talks in coded stories that most people will totally misunderstand. The secrets of the kingdom of God has been given to you, but to others I speak in parables, so that though seeing, they may not see, though hearing, they may not understand. Jesus deliberately encoded his teachings, revealing deeper truths only to those ready to receive them. So, what was Christ's secret message? Well, to understand it, let's take a look at Jesus' first public miracle according to the Gospel of John, turning water into wine. Well, many mystics believe that this miracle is actually a spiritual parable, not a literal event. Water represents the ego or the old self, and wine is a symbol of wisdom and higher consciousness. So Jesus wasn't just making Merlot, he was signaling to transform the self. In fact, he pretty much says this. No one puts new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the new wine will burst the skins, the wine is spilled, and the skins are ruined. But new wine must be put into new wineskins. Okay, obviously, this is not just a bartending tip. The new wine here can be read as a higher teaching, a revelation of spiritual truth. And the old wineskins? Those are outdated structures, rigid dogma, the old self, people not yet ready to receive the deeper meanings. Jesus even says, I have yet many things to say unto you, but you cannot bear them now. In other words, you need to give up outdated and old ways of thinking before you can reach higher consciousness. But really, when it comes to inner alchemy, it's a metaphor for turning the lead of the old self into the gold of enlightenment. Instead of lead into gold, here we have water into wine. I bet you didn't know alchemy was in the Bible. When you start seeing the Bible this way, you realize Jesus performing miracles isn't like a superhero in a Marvel movie. It's a coded message for your own transformation. Healing the blind could symbolize opening one's spiritual eyes. Walking on water could be about rising above the turbulent waters of emotion. Calming the storm might be about finding inner peace or integrating the waters of the unconscious. And raising Lazarus from the dead could be about awakening the spiritually dead. In fact, Jesus often criticized people for being spiritually asleep or dead and called himself the life giver. But what if Jesus had an entire second layer of teaching, a mystery school curriculum that never made it into the official Bible? According to the Gnostics, he did. See, the Gnostics were a group of early Christians that totally got it and saw Jesus' teaching as an instruction manual to become Christ. See, the word gnosis means knowledge, and Gnostics taught that you are a divine spark trapped in a material world shaped by ignorance and illusion, and that Jesus came not to die for your sins, but to remind you of who you really are. In fact, in a gospel of theirs called the Gospel of Philip, it literally says that when you understand the higher teachings, that person is no longer a Christian, but a Christ. Another gospel that didn't make it into the Bible, the Gospel of Thomas, opens with this jaw-dropping line. These are the secret sayings which the living Jesus spoke. And he said, whoever finds the interpretation of these sayings will not taste death. Hold on here, secret sayings, not taste death? This is not the Jesus of Sunday school. This is Jesus the initiate, Jesus the revealer of inner gnosis, knowledge that liberates the soul. Jesus continues and says, the seeker should not stop until he finds. When he does find, he will be disturbed. After having been disturbed, he will be astonished. Then he will reign over everything. All right, so the Gospel of Thomas is amazing. And Jesus goes on to reveal the kingdom of heaven isn't a place in the clouds, but a state of consciousness and all around us, if we could just have the eyes to see it. Okay, but I have a ton of videos about all the Gospels that the church tried to destroy. You should go watch them because they're really damn good. But this is not just the channel. This is a movement, a mental revolution. And you're not watching by accident. So make sure that you like and subscribe to help make enlightenment go viral. And if you want to go deeper, check out my books and downloads on inner transformation. Links are in the description. But this video isn't about the books that got left out of the Bible. So let's go back to the Bible itself. Because what if I told you the Bible has been used to summon demons? Yeah, seriously. Ever hear of Solomon? He was a biblical king known for his wisdom, but in medieval legend, he was also considered the ultimate magician. There's a whole genre of magic books called Solomonic grimoires, like the Lesser Key of Solomon, that are basically manuals on summoning spirits. And guess what those grimoires are chock full of? Bible verses. They instruct the magician to recite specific psalms and prayers to invoke God's power and compel demons. Let that sink in for a second. The Bible, the Holy Bible, was being used as a spell book to summon demons. Okay, but how? To understand this on a deeper level, we need to talk about numbers and hidden codes. We've already explored the Tetragrammaton, Yud-He-Vav-He, the sacred four-letter name of God. In some occult traditions, it's considered the most powerful name in existence, the nuclear option of divine language. But here's what many people don't realize. See, in Hebrew, there's no separate system for numbers. In English, we have the alphabet and Arabic numerals. But in Hebrew, the letters are the numbers. So when you read Hebrew, you're not just reading words, you're reading math. Let's take the Tetragrammaton itself, Yud-He-Vav-He. Here's what each letter equals. Yud is 10. He is 5, Vav is 6, and He is of course 5. Add it all up and you get 26. So the numerical value of the name of God, Yud-He-Vav-He, is 26. Now think of this name not as just a sound, but as a command line, as a string of divine code. Kabbalists believe that God created the universe through letters, but since every letter is also a number, it means reality is created through numbers. In other words, reality is created from a kind of code, like the movie The Matrix. All right, you might be thinking, okay, cool, sacred math, cosmic code, Yud-He-Vav-He equals 26. What does this have to do with summoning demons? Well, hold that thought, because before we can talk about how to manipulate reality, we have to understand how it's built. If reality is based on a code, like a divine operating system, then to change it, you need to know the language that it's written in, and that language is numbers. Okay, but to understand why this is so important and how it connects everything together, there's something you have to know. See, the Kabbalists weren't the only ones who saw reality as being built from hidden patterns. In fact, they were highly influenced by Pythagoras. Yeah, that Pythagoras. You probably remember him as the triangle guy from math class. But what they don't tell you is, Pythagoras wasn't just a mathematician, he was a mystic, a philosopher, and basically the original Neo. Why? Because he saw the code of existence. He famously said, all is number. He literally saw the entirety of existence as numbers, and Pythagoras began his own secret society around all of this. Pythagoras was less of a math teacher and more of a badass rebel cult leader. Pythagoreans even used the pentagram to recognize each other as members. And to the Pythagoreans, numbers were not just for counting, they were existence itself. And of course, if you're gonna have a secret society, what do you have to have? A triangle. I mean, hell, Pythagoras is the triangle guy after all. And at the center of their system was a strange sacred symbol called the tetractys. The tetractys looked simple, just 10 dots arranged in a triangle, but it was everything to the Pythagoreans. They literally worshipped this thing. Why? Because each row represented a level of creation. 1 was unity, the divine source. 2, duality, separation, polarity. 3, harmony, the synthesis. 4, manifestation, the physical world. And if you add them together, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, it equals 10, the perfect number, symbolizing wholeness and completion. The tetractys was a map of the universe, a triangle of power, the original pyramid of meaning. Pythagoreans meditated on it, swore oaths by it, saw it as the blueprint of reality. But hold on. The tetractys represents 4 levels of creation. Does that sound familiar? Here's where it gets wild. Centuries later, Jewish Kabbalists saw the tetractys and said, okay, bet. See, the tetractys has 4 levels, just like the 4 Kabbalistic worlds, and the 4 letters in the divine name. So, since in Hebrew, letters are also numbers, they decided to see what happened if they plugged the tetragrammaton into the tetractys, like plugging in holy code in a divine operating system. They repeated the letters in different combinations, like divine permutations, layering the sacred name of God across the tetractys. And when they added up the values of all 4 rows with the values of the Hebrew numbers of the tetragrammaton, the number they got was 72. Thus they came to the conclusion that there were 72 names of God. Not names like Jeff or Steve, but basically like the code for the divine operating system of reality. Think of the 72 names like command lines, subroutines in the divine source code. Each of the 72 names is 3 letters long, and they saw them as a spell, a vibration, a key. And when recited with precision, intention, and ritual, they believed they could reprogram themselves and reality. Have you ever seen the movie Pi? Not like cherry pie, but the number pi. In the movie, the main character becomes obsessed with a mysterious 216-digit number hidden in the Torah. He believes it's the true name of God, a code that controls the stock market, unlock spiritual enlightenment, or drive you insane. But But why 216? Because the 72 names of God are each 3 letters long, and 72 times 3 equals 216. In the movie, discovering it is like hacking the source code of the universe. The movie is a metaphor for Kabbalistic magic, because if the universe really is code made from letters, numbers, vibrations, whatever you want to call them, then the 72 names of God would be like root commands. And those who know how to use them, they aren't just praying, they're programming. So how do you actually use them? Well, we're going to find out. Okay, but again, what does this have to do with summoning demons? We're going to get to the demons, I promise. But first, we have to talk about angels, because before magicians could command a demon, they believed they had to know how to invoke an angel. And this all comes back to those 72 names of God. As I said before, each of the 72 names is a 3-letter divine code, a spiritual formula. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Each of those 72 names was believed to represent a unique aspect of divine energy, a specific vibration or divine force. But energy needs a vessel, and that's where the angels come in. Kabbalists and ritual magicians took each of the 72 divine names and added either El, meaning of God, or Yah, a form of the divine name, to the end of each name. This turned each abstract name of God into a named angel, basically a spiritual intelligence that could carry and embody that particular vibration or power. All right, if that's kind of confusing, here's an example. One of the 72 3-letter names is Mem Yud Kaf. If you add El to the end of it, you get Mikael or Michael. Mikael literally means who is like God. But that's not just a name, it's a statement of power and authority. In magical systems, Mikael or Michael is the protector, the spiritual warrior, the banisher of darkness. So to invoke Mikael is to summon the archetype of strength. Every single one of these angelic names, like Aladia, Vehuia, Siteel, Rehel, Lelahel. It's a channel for a particular force. Think of them like 72 rays of divine light or 72 apps in the God software. 72 spiritual functions you can call on to transform reality and yourself. In traditional angel magic, you call the name, recite the psalm associated with it, and align yourself with that energy. Some were invoked for healing, some for protection, some for insight, some for battle. But here's where the line starts to blur, because the same system used to call on angels was later flipped by magicians, heretics, and sorcerers to command demons. So we've talked about the 72 angels, divine intelligences derived from the sacred names of God. But what if I told you there's a dark mirror? Because according to demonology, there are also 72 demons, spirits of chaos, power, and repressed knowledge. They're like the shadow twins of the 72 angels, like corrupted data from the same divine source code, viruses in the divine operating system. So where does this idea come from? It goes all the way back to Solomon. He was a wise king in the Bible, but in occult lore, Solomon was also a master magician, capable of summoning, binding, and commanding demons. So flash forward to the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, and Solomon's legacy explodes into a library of grimoires, magical handbooks for ritual summoning. The most famous, the Lesser Key of Solomon, also called the Lemegeton, and within it, the notorious Ars Goetia. This is where the 72 demons really take center stage. In this book, each demon is named, ranked, and assigned a seal, which is a sigil that you use to call them. And they each have special abilities, like revealing secrets, influencing emotions, destroying enemies, teaching science, and on and on. But here's where the Bible comes in. These grimoires instruct the magician to surround themselves with protection by invoking divine names, and often using psalms from the Bible. Take the Key of Solomon, for example. It tells the practitioner to cast a magic circle, burn incense, wear consecrated robes, and chant psalms. The Bible was literally their spell source. To some, this sounds like heresy. It was for commanding angels, binding demons, bending reality. It was a spiritual operating system. And Solomon, he was the original hacker. Today, many occultists believe that each of the 72 demons in the Ars Goetia corresponds to one of the 72 angels from Kabbalistic tradition. This creates a shadow twin concept. You could say the demons aren't the opposite of angels, they're the same forces, but reflected in a broken mirror. Each demon has its own sign or sigil, a symbolic glyph, and it's believed to act kinda like a phone number to that spirit. Or you could compare them to QR codes for the unconscious mind. Scanning them activates something internally. All right, hold on. what does all this mean? See, we've gone pretty deep here, looking at zodiac signs, planetary alignments, alchemical parables, Kabbalistic code, angels, demons, psalms as spells. We even plugged God's name into a triangle and found 72 magical subroutines. But what do we actually do with all this? All right, let's take a look at this in a grounded and rational way. We need to understand what the hell this system actually is. It's not just superstition, and it's not just some medieval roleplay, and it's definitely not just about spooky rituals in candlelit basements. This is an ancient technology of consciousness, because in this system, names aren't just words, they're keys, and some of those keys unlock heaven, others hell. But those places aren't out there, they're in your own psyche. In fact, this is actual, powerful psychology. That's what it really is. You know Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology? He would have totally loved this. He believed that mystical symbols, magical names, and divine visions weren't just fantasies or delusions, but manifestations of the collective unconscious. In other words, archetypes or organizing structures of the psyche that exist in all of us. In Jung's Red Book, he literally wrote down conversations with inner figures during trance states. Wise old men, serpents, divine beings. No drugs, no hallucinations, just what he called active imagination and raw psychological power. He saw all these experiences as symbolic representations of archetypes that exist within the psyche. So when ancient magicians summoned angels or demons, were they conjuring invisible beings, or were they creating a symbolic space to confront their own mind? Take the demon names in the Goetia. Aleister Crowley wrote that they weren't literal spirits. He said the 72 demons are actually parts of the brain, and evoking them is about accessing and controlling parts of your mind. Many modern occultists agree. They see these demons as psychological complexes, pieces of yourself. Some are desires, some are fears, some are even hidden talents, some are traumas. And Goetic magic becomes a ritualized form of internal shadow work, a way of facing the monsters in your unconscious mind, not to worship them or fear them, but to integrate them. These spirits, in this view, are like autonomous fragments of the psyche, and calling on them is a way to make the unconscious conscious, to take what's hidden and bring it into the light under your will. Same with angels. Invoking Michael isn't just about summoning a divine warrior to float down from heaven. It's about activating the archetype of protection and courage that's within you. You speak the name, you focus your intent, and you step into that role, and in doing so, you become it. If you want me to do a whole video on angel magic and demon magic and the Ars Goetia, let me know, tell me in the comments. All right, so after all this, maybe the Bible is a spell book. Maybe it's a code. And maybe it's not about summoning literal angels or demons. Maybe it's about summoning yourself. The demons, they're your inner chaos, and the angels, they're your highest potential. And maybe Solomon wasn't a historical sorcerer, but a symbol of what happens when you master the code and learn to balance both light and shadow within. And think about the divine name, Yud-He-Vav-He. In a psychological context, Yud-He-Vav-He could be seen as an archetype of the higher self, the totality of the psyche, both conscious and unconscious, masculine and feminine, left brain, right brain, all together in unity. And when it comes to the zodiac, I don't believe it has anything to do with the literal planets or stars at all. Those are symbols for aspects of your own personality. It's all inside. The names, the sigils, the psalms, the rituals, those are the interfaces. They're how the ancients spoke with the deep layers of reality and themselves. And whether you call it magic or psychology, the effect is the same. Words shape perception, perception shapes action, and action shapes reality. Now look, let's be honest here. We can't say for sure that Jesus' disciples were literally meant to represent the zodiac, or that every miracle is a coded alchemical metaphor. We don't know that the Tetragrammaton was designed to be a mystical formula about the levels of the universe. These are theories and symbolic correspondences. But you have to admit, it makes a hell of a lot more sense than taking it all literally, because the alternative is believing the creator of the universe is obsessed with animal sacrifices, petty rules, and eternal torture over eating shrimp. Hey look, at the end of the day, the Bible, it's a book of stories. So here's the real question. What's more empowering? Reading the Bible literally and bowing before a god, or seeing it as a symbolic spell book, a manual for transformation where you're meant to become God? But what about all the books that didn't make it into the Bible? All the secret teachings the church banned? What if the real teachings of Jesus were about how you could become divine, reign over everything, and never die? Check out my video about the greatest secret of Jesus banned by the church. It'll change the way you see everything.